Hello, everyone. Good afternoon again. Welcome to APC Webinar series. My name is Sean, APC Sports Manager. For today's webinar, we are going to learn about legal implication of COVID-19 on parasports and planning strategy. In these difficult times due to COVID-19, we have experienced unexpected postponement and cancellation of many sports competition and events, including Tokyo 2020 Paralympic Games. In this regard, we like to give our members some insight on legal implication of the COVID-19 on process and event of Paralympic community in our region, and strategic legal planning addressing the challenges. So before I hand over microphone to Mr. Damir Valiyev, I'd like to invite Mr. John for his opening remarks. John is the chairperson of Legal and Ethics Committee of APC, also APC Executive Board member. He has former athletes, para-athlete in table tennis, had achieved many medals at international competitions, also participating in Paralympic Games and Asian Para Games as chef de mission of Malaysia team. Thank you for being with us, John, and floor is yours, please.
Yep. Thank you, Sean. Can all of you hear me? Presume you can, right? Yep. All right. Good day to all of you participants from all over the region of Asia. I hope you're all in the best of health and that everyone is staying safe in wherever you are in this region. In KL, Malaysia, we're having just started a lockdown, going to start on effective midnight tonight. But anyway, let's get back to this webinar. On behalf of the APC Legal and Ethics Committee, truly we welcome all of you to this session, which is going to touch upon the legal implications due to the COVID-19 pandemic, right? Now, in this so-called new norm environment, I'm sure everyone and every sport association are facing new challenges, and especially these new challenges that comes with new and unexpected consequences, right? So today's topic will cover such situations, hopefully, and that with the sessions being played out, hopefully you'll come away with some clarity and with some handles and tools on how to deal with this new norm. Yeah. Now, without further ado, I will just pass back to Sean to introduce our distinguished guest speaker, who is actually a member of the Legal and Ethics Committee. And I hope you will have an enjoyable and wonderful time. Back to you, Sean.
Thank you, John, for your warm welcoming remarks for our audiences. Yeah, we are also pleased to have Mr. Damir Valiyev for this presentation on topic mentioned earlier. Like John said, Mr. Damir is the member of APC Legal and Ethics Committee. He is a partner at 8 Court Legal Firm, acting as head of sports law practice. Also, he has been involved in many international sports-related projects across the world. So without further ado, Mr. Damir, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Dear John, dear Sean, thank you for the introduction. I welcome everyone. I hope everyone is safe, in good mood, and ready for the webinar today. We will talk, as my colleagues already mentioned, we will talk about the legal implications of COVID-19. As John rightfully pointed out, it affected all of us. I think it's unnecessary to say that we somehow live in this reality, trying to adapt our practices. It's not easy to plan, although you probably noticed the second part of the topic, it's planning strategies. It's quite optimistic. We can talk about the strategies. We can stay optimistic. but we also need to consider legal implications. Hopefully, we will be able to plan coming back to full sports, to having full activity soon. And our topic today will be based on two issues. One, what are the challenges we're facing? What are the implications we all focus at the moment? And what can be the strategy, the best strategy to be able to get prepared, to be able to address those legal risks that we all face at the moment. So let me run you through the topics of today's webinar. So we'll talk about the implications. We will talk specifically on regulatory and administrative aspects. I think to most of you it's quite relevant. You as the members of the NPCs, as the staff of the APC and NPCs. We will touch upon commercial and contractual aspects. I'm sure you also have some interaction with the contracts, with the renegotiating, with force majeure clause, and all the related issues that arise from the commercial aspects of your activity. And finally, we will talk about the risk assessment and what can be our recommendations to address those risks. Little disclaimer that I want to make. Well, first of all, it's not a legal advice because all the cases are specific. And like I said, it's hard to plan. The situation is changing. It cannot be considered as an advice from the APC. We're happy to share our view, our recommendation from the Legal and Ethics Commission, but again, in each and every case, you have to seek for specific advice and base yourself on, first of all, jurisdiction specifics and also the event specifics. But nevertheless, we're happy to answer the questions. Hopefully, the webinar today will be as practical as possible. What are the legal implications that the Paralympic community faced? Well, if we are talking about events, the major implications, of course, were the postponement of Tokyo 2020 Paralympic Games and all the legal issues that took place around the postponement, including qualification tournaments, eligibility issues, anti-doping compliance. At the Asian level, it was cancellation of Philippines ASEAN Par Games as well. We will touch upon certain issues, but for the Tokyo 2020, we discussed with the colleagues, we agreed that you will get more detailed information from the IPC. So I think it will be fair to keep it within the Asian community at the moment and not specifically address the Tokyo issues. Although, as I said, we will touch upon certain aspects. And of course, for the APC, the planning challenges for Bahrain Asian Youth Games next year, at the end of next year, and Hangzhou Asian Par Games. I know that the work is going on. There's enough time, and hopefully by the time the events take place, the situation will get better. But nevertheless, we have to adapt and we have to anticipate certain difficulties and hurdles that we may face along the process. So what are the major issues? As I mentioned, these are qualification and eligibility. So for Tokyo, the IPC issued revised qualification regulations. You can find it on the website. I'm sure you got the updates also from the IPC in that respect. And well, the calendar is also will be, I'm sure it will be available. So these are ongoing issues, but also anti-doping control, which was adjusted. We will talk about it in more details in further slides, and compliance issues. Well, the main issue at the moment is resuming the events, resuming the parasports events, sports events in general. On one hand, we can see, we all follow the news, we can see what's going on, the number of COVID cases increasing. On the other hand, we can see that more and more events, sports events, and also para events are resuming. So the question is how to cope with these two streams. On one hand, clearly the trend is to bring the sports back. On the other hand, the risk is still there. The situation is not that favorable as we would all want. So in that circumstances, we need to consider what are the local requirements, what are the national regulations, and what are the recommendations from the international federations, from the IPC in that respect. There have been different studies and there have been different opinions. One of the opinion states that para-athletes can be at more risk of having severe effects or consequences of COVID-19, although it's not scientifically proven, or there's no evidence that this is the case. But nevertheless, I mean, for certain categories, it can be quite topical to have increased safety and health requirements. So what was the response from the international organizations? Well, APC was quick to respond with the message of the APC president at the beginning of the pandemic, supporting the NPCs and the APC communities. There have been a number of online meetings with NPCs. I know that there have been already meetings with Hangzhou 2022, with Bahrain 2021, coordinating commissions to develop the action plan to plan the event. Well, our webinar is one of the part of the response, which I think is a great initiative because it gives you the opportunity to look at certain issues more closely and try to address them going forward. And finally, among the recent events or forthcoming events, there will be a first ever APC Athletes Forum for Asian para-athletes at the beginning of December, 2nd and 3rd of December. I personally encourage you to attend. I think it will be a big success, and that's what we all need at the moment. Well, of course, there was a response from the IPC as well. There is a guideline for athletes on potential impact of COVID-19. You can check it on the website. It's quite broad on one hand. On the other hand, it outlines the recommendations for all para-athletes. The more specific documents, and for those of you who have a medical background or somehow interact with the medical aspects, you may be interested in seeing assessment of COVID-19 risk based on specific disabilities. And it, in particular, addresses certain disabilities that, again, may be a risk factor or may not. So, again, the approach here is having as much information as you can. Well, going forward, most of the international federations, they developed the plan for restarting sporting activities. These are usually quite comprehensive guidelines. Again, depending on the type of the event, depending on the type of the sport, you may wish to check those guidelines to see that how the specific sports activities can be, and the risks around that sports activities can be mitigated. There are certain guidelines also addressing regulatory issues. For instance, FIFA issued quite a comprehensive document on shifting the seasons, on extending employment agreements, on changing transfer windows. Again, the number of cases and the number of questions are so diverse and numerous. We will try to focus on the general approach, that we advise you to follow. But then again, I mean, when it comes to a specific question, you have to check different resources. You have to check different materials to find the right answer. Well, important thing to mention, and we will talk about it a few more times going forward, is that these regulations and this guidance by the international federations, they do not constitute legal advice. So these are the recommendations by the sports authorities, by the governing bodies. But when it comes to staging an event in your particular country, or organizing certain activities, you should always follow the national laws, the national regulations. That's the sovereign part of the legal system, and you should always consult with the local authorities for the approvals to host the event, to hold the event. Of course, recommendations by the international federations are quite helpful because they can be sport specific. They can help you to avoid certain issues that may not be covered by the national regulations. But at the same time, the base and the criteria for decision making is the local laws and the local regulations. So when it comes to the question of certain ambiguities or interpretation, you should be followed by the local requirements, by the local laws. I'm sure in every country it is the same. In the UAE, there are specific requirements for organizing mass events, organizing sports events. You have to keep updated, and at the same time, like I mentioned, you have to take into consideration the recommendations from the international governing bodies. So the key aspects and the key considerations for you to decide whether to run an event or not, whether to postpone it or cancel, should be always, and that's the recommendation by the IPC, by the international federations, should be always health and safety criteria. So the organizing committee must ensure that they can comply with all the local laws and requirements, and based on that, they can make a decision to go forward with the international event or the local event, to have it with the spectators or without the spectators. Again, the criteria can be different, but you have to consult with the local laws, first of all. And then, of course, you have to take into consideration the guidance by the IPC, by the APC as well. Well, the other thing to mention is that, of course, the events are quite different. The sports may differ significantly, and the approach of one size fits all usually does not work, especially in the current circumstances. You have to consider all the specifics. You have to consider, we'll get to that point as well, you have to consider limitations, travel limitations, immigration limitations. Again, as a guideline, you may check WHO risk assessment and mitigation checklist for mass gatherings, and there is a specific section for sports events in the context of COVID-19. It's quite comprehensive. It's quite helpful. In my opinion, it can be also the base for running an event, for organizing an event. There is also an IPC classification of hygiene control guidelines. Well, again, there is a disclaimer that it is specific to the current pandemic, and it's not intended to replace local laws and regulations. So again, going back to the main message is that you have to start always with the local laws and the local requirements to when it comes to organizing a local event, para event or sports event. Well, among the practical steps, what we generally recommend is to put a risk mitigation policy in place. Of course, it's well, probably easier to say than have it done, but nevertheless, if you could make it as much comprehensive as you can, It's not always easy, but at the same time, you have to think of all potential risks that you may face while planning the event. Well, the major risk is, of course, cancellation of the event. You have to be prepared. That's the negative scenario, but unfortunately, that's the new reality we all live. There is a risk that national measures can be implemented on restricting the events or imposing new restrictions or reimposing the new restrictions. You know, certain countries, they brought back the lockdown. Other countries are less probably strict on that. But nevertheless, in each case, you have to see what the current situation and try to assess what it can be going forward. And like I said, the health and safety considerations should be the guiding principles when making decision on organizing the event or postponing or canceling the event, for instance. Well, a few words about anti-doping guidelines during the COVID pandemic. And I know it's been topical for a while, especially at the beginning. And at the wake of pandemic, the IPC adjusted its anti-doping program in line with WHO and WADA requirements. Going forward, WADA issued updated guidance on resumption athlete testing to restart and return to normal doping control. Of course, it's not the same. The situation is not the same as it used to be, but nevertheless, the obligation of the IPC anti-doping code remains. So the testing can happen at any time. It's an article that requires for the testing to happen at any time or place during ongoing pandemic. And athletes must always be available for testing. Well, I would assume that some of you would have these type of questions, whether we should run the doping control, whether there are any adjustments. Well, again, the key rule, the principal rule is that, yes, the doping control should be in place during the pandemic. Article 2.3 of the IPC code prohibiting, evading, refusing, or failing to submit doping samples is still in place. It continues to apply. Although there have been certain new measures implemented to protect athletes and WADA officers. So basically, those athletes listed in the IPC registered testing programs are generally advised to inform the IPC if they or any of their close contacts, family members, coaches, have been diagnosed with COVID-19 or experience any symptoms of coronavirus. So again, with certain amendments, with certain adjustments, but the doping control is carrying on. You have to stay alerted. You have to stay compliant from that perspective. And well, at the moment, COVID may not be an excuse, or the circumstances may not be an excuse for failing or refusing to take the test. Well, a few words on regulatory and administrative aspects, not just for the athletes, but probably for all of us. We face travel limitations, certain immigration and visa processing issues. Again, these are very country-specific, very event-specific issues. You have to consult with the consulates of those countries that organize the events. I know it's been the case, for instance, for the US Open tennis championships. You know, US has closed consular sections of the embassies. They do not process tourist visas at the moment, but nevertheless, those athletes who participated at the US Open, and they had also para-athletes part, which was initially decided to not to run that event, but in the end they approved also wheelchair tennis as well within the tournament, and the athletes were granted visas to enter the US and to participate in the tournament. Again, when it comes to the event, anticipation is important. If you feel that your athletes are planning to participate, you should take steps in advance. You should consult with the consulates of those countries to try to resolve travel issues that the athletes may face. Well, the other part on administrative side, and I'm sure that you faced it one way or another, is the decision making within your organization. Quite common, certain NPCs. It was also the case for the APC when the decision was made to operate from home. So again, the question is, how do you ensure that the decision-making process is legitimate and in line with your constitution, in line with your protocols? For that, you need to revise what's your requirements, how the constitution is drafted, how the process can be organized, and you may consider introducing certain amendments, because if there is no provision that expressly allows you to run the meetings online, to use online voting, or to have some virtual elections, for instance, you may wish to revise the constitution and to apply certain amendments going forward. Again, it's a typical situation for all of us, but we expect that it will remain for a while, and in order to stay compliant, in order to stay legitimate, you may wish to adapt your regulations to make sure that all online meetings and all the processes that you do distantly or through virtual communication are compliant. Well, the next aspect is employment. Well, again, at national level, there have been revision. Certain countries, for instance, the UAE, introduced certain requirements during the pandemic. It may affect your organization, your employees, but it may also affect para-athletes being employed with certain clubs, depending on the type of engagement. You may advise them to check the national laws as well and how they are protected from that perspective. Bringing back the case of FIFA, for instance, FIFA recommended national associations to extend all employment contracts. It recommended the clubs to extend all employment contracts to the length of the season. So basically, it's been agreed that the clubs will consider the extension of the season. But then again, I mean, these were not binding decisions. These were recommendations by FIFA to all the member associations. Financial issue is quite quite crucial as well. Most of the athletes faced difficulties, financial difficulties, not being able to compete, not being able to perform basically their main activities. Again, certain federations, certain international federations, they have stimulus packages. At the NPC level, you may help the athletes from that perspective, guiding them on financial support. It may also be the case at the national level that the government supports para-athletes. So from that perspective, again, you have to consider the actual cases and the actual implications that your para-athletes are facing currently. Well, the other part is, again, it's It's a question whether you deal with the commercial aspects or not, but I'm sure quite a few have sponsors, have merchandisers. I'm seeing certain participants are taking pictures. No worries. You will get the access to the presentation, so you will have the same presentation sent to you by the APC colleagues. So you may have issues also with the sponsors, for instance. Well, as an example, you had a contract that was valid until the end of 2020, until the end of the Olympic cycle, and it would specifically cover, for instance, Tokyo event. The same may apply to merchandisers. So how do you approach it? How do you, again, it's very specific, but the first thing you have to do, you have to carefully check your contract. What are the provisions? Can you take advantage of force majeure clause? How is it worded? How is it structured? Does it allow you to extend the contract? Is the contract subject to activation during the Tokyo Olympics, for instance? So that may be helpful as well. So the first step would be to check, to make a checklist of all the contracts that you have in place, and also to see what can be the strategy, how much freedom you have based on those contracts. And of course, certain sponsors can be more cooperative. Others may, again, facing financial difficulties, may be less cooperative. It's all specific, but your main point of reference is always the contract. And how is it worded? You can also take advantages going forward, because I think we are in such a perfect storm at the moment, all of us, to revise your entire structure, to see how you operate, to make sure that you don't face those issues going forward. So for those contracts that have been signed already, it's basically for you the task to go through it to see what can be the way out, what's the dispute resolution mechanism, whether you can renegotiate the contract, whether you can rely on force majeure clause. But going forward, for the new contract, you may revise certain provisions. You may have robust force majeure clause to make sure it covers pandemic. It's pandemic specific. It is as much specific as you want it to be. The other part you may want to have is having indemnities and liability waivers if you are unable to perform your obligations due to pandemic or due to other force majeure situations. And last part probably to consider is to take a closer look at insurance. Not all of us, not all of you have insurance policies in place. It's not easy now to negotiate insurance policy from COVID perspective with the insurance companies, but nevertheless, if you have insurance coverage covering your liability, you may try to take advantage of it. You may try to rely on it. So going forward and moving to the specific recommendations, and again, these are very broad. You may find them quite general, but it's not always the case that all organizations, not necessarily NPCs, but other institutions and organizations have those basic principles in place. So in light of the current restrictions, and especially if you organize major events or local events, you may wish to have a proper risk assessment and risk mitigation policy. So to make your life easier, you can base it on recommendations of the IPC, of the IFs, which, like I said, are quite comprehensive. You may take advantage of having those documents, those guidelines in place. But at the same time, you should always coordinate events, and you have to check your local requirements, usually from the public health authorities, and seek for approvals from government approvals to organize certain events. So based on that, we recommend to evaluate risk management procedures to make sure that all the material information is available for the senior management to make the decisions on certain aspects. So at the moment, it's the matter of having full information, having updated information from government resources, and again, to consult with the government authorities, to consult with the sports governing bodies to be able to navigate your events and the current circumstances. Well, what we also recommend is to have a comprehensive guideline for testing, potential isolation, reporting of the events of COVID cases in line with the national requirements, and more specifically indicating penalties for non-compliance and for non-cooperation. It is becoming an issue. You might have seen certain issues at the events already when the athletes were tested positive, they tried to escape or they tried to avoid isolation. Some of them, they tried to challenge disqualification. To make your life easier, it is recommended to have COVID health self-declaration, basically that allows you first to collect the tests, to run the tests, to isolate the athletes if required, to run medical treatment or to direct them to have medical treatment, again, depending on the national laws and the national specifics. And most importantly, to have indemnity and release of liability statement within those forms. So the way it works, basically, you run a test, you organize an event, you run a test on the athlete, you provide him a self-declaration form where first he certifies whether he has any symptoms of COVID or not, and second, he agrees for the test to be taken, for the data to be processed, his personal, his medical data to be processed, and most importantly, he or she agrees to release the organizer from the liability, which is always the case because certain athletes may face the issues with the medical treatment, may face the issues of having no personal insurance, having no accommodation. So from that perspective, you would rather have that document that would allow you, on one hand, to release yourself as the event organizer from liability that may arise from those challenges. Well, the next part, which is also important, it's not necessarily legal, but it's more administrative and more organizational part, is to have a proper communication plan. Things are changing overnight quite often. You may wish to have prepared communication, prepared documents that you can send immediately to the athletes, to the sports community. So basically to have those first response statements that you want or you have to send out to your contacts to make sure that the athletes are updated, all the parties, the stakeholders are updated, and they have information from the source, basically from the event organizing, rather than checking the news and making certain allegations. It also applies to social media. It's a big issue nowadays. So you may wish to engage a person within your organization who will be in charge of communication. So communication is important. We encourage you to have a proper guidance, proper process, and proper authorization process, basically to allow the principal within your organization to approve communication and to make sure it's consistent with the position of your organization. And of course, you should have a comprehensive and updated contact database. If you organize an event, you have to make sure that you have all the contact details so you can reach out immediately, all the participants, all the staff, to update them on the changes. There have been a few questions that I will try to address going forward that were sent before the presentation. One specific question was, how do we make sure that the athletes are, well, I read it before, but the idea is, let me double check it again. So the question was, how do documents have to be submitted to play international games, I think, and how to convey information to people where the games are, how the para players have to be informed in each case. So again, it's your communication plan, it's your updated contact list. You may wish to have a run a test to make sure that you can reach all the para athletes. You can reach the coaches and the persons involved. Going back to your contractual liabilities, we recommend to have a checklist of all the contracts that you have, to keep it consolidated, to check, again, I mean, we talked about to check the clauses that allow you to terminate for convenience, to check what's your liabilities towards the partners, to check what's your negative scenario, what's your worst case scenario, best case scenario, and ideally to have some sort of contact person who will be able to run your contractual obligations. I know it's not always easy. Certain institutions, certain organizations, they're understaffed especially in the current situation, but nevertheless, you may at least delegate those points to those either legal counsels or those persons who are familiar with the contractual aspects, commercial aspects of your activity. Well, one thing to remember and one thing to consider, which is not always obvious when it comes to organizing certain meetings, for instance, online, or working from home, or having some distant participation, you have to consider cybersecurity. You have to make sure that the software that you're using is protected. It may affect your organizations. You may not think of it, but it may. You have to make sure that the data collection that you process is in line with the national laws, because it's been, those of you who follow probably seen last year, especially in Europe, there have been strict policies implemented in respect of having data collection, personal data collection, and processing data collection. You have to make sure that the medical information that you gather, that you process, is confidential. Well, most of the time, just to give you an example, it can be a very, a very simple mistake, sending the results of the tests of one list to all the athletes, for instance, or to the club, assuming that, well, there's nothing wrong about it. But if you think of it, it may be, it may not be in line with the local laws, but also from the point of having good governance and compliance standards in place, you may wish to, to keep that information, this personal, especially medical information, confidential. Especially it comes into play when you organize international events, because there might be cross-border issues, there might be different jurisdictions involved. Well, again, simple thing, but you would rather have it in a compliant manner and have it in proper order. Well, and probably last recommendations, we're 45 minutes exactly from the start, is again to check what insurance is available. Certain countries are more advanced when it comes to insurance policies. You can benefit from more comprehensive insurance. In other countries, it's not the common practice to have comprehensive insurance. The courts may not be too welcoming or too proactive when it comes to the insurance claims, and may not be too generous to grant the insurance. But this is the point to consider, again, especially for the international events, to see what's your current insurance policy, how you can upgrade it, how you can get a better result now, and of course to document your claims, your potential claims, and collect all the evidence. If you face any issues, make sure that you document it properly, you take pictures, you engage witnesses. Again, these are all the basic things, but it's not always the case organizing events. All of you, I mean, not necessarily during the pandemic, but there are so many issues you have to think about. You may not always consider legal parts. So better be prepared, better be safe, well, and better be updated. These are the probably the key points on my side. There are a few takeaways that I would like to highlight. Well, the key principle, the key criteria is the health and safety requirements. These are recommendations from the IPC, from the APC. At the same time, NPC should follow local regulations, local requirements. They should consult. It is advisable to consult, to base your decisions also on the guidance of the IPC, international federations, of the APC. But keep in mind, if there is a question of ambiguity, you should be guided by the local requirements in the first place. And then, of course, supplemented issues can be regulated by the guidance from the international federations, from the IPC. And try to have comprehensive risk management, as comprehensive as you can. Try to identify your country and your organization specifics. Try to tackle those risks that you can, and hopefully we will get to the point soon that we will not have to address or keep in mind cancellation, postponement issues, and how to deal with that. So on that note, we move to the Q&A session. Let me check if there is anything from the chat.
No, Damir, thank you for your great presentation.
Well, there was one question, Sean, sorry to interrupt, but you sent me two questions ahead of the
sure. Yeah, we can
ahead of the presentation. So one was regarding the protocols and how to inform para-athletes, which we covered, to have a proper communication plan in place. And the second one was quite broad. It was the question regarding updates in the sports law.
Yeah.
Well, there have been updates. There have been updates at the national level. These are mainly the restrictions that the local governments impose on organizing sports events, mass events. So that's the key update. If we talk about regulatory updates, so that's the key update at the national level. You have to follow them. There have been updates at the anti-doping level, but we also mentioned that, well, the doping process is back in place. you have to stay compliant. There are certain issues when the athlete can report of being COVID positive. It may affect the testing. It may affect the plans, the water plans to take the tests. And of course, there are updates related to qualifications, eligibility, and admission of Tokyo para athletes. Well, from that perspective, you have to follow IPC updates. You have to follow the calendar. The updates are happening on a daily basis. From commercial perspective, from contractual perspective, again, you have to check how force majeure is treated in your home countries, how the national legal system, the legal framework is adapting. So to make it short, there are updates. It's very specific, jurisdiction specific, it's case specific. So if there are any specific questions that you have, feel free to email them or to raise them now, probably. I'm not sure about the format at the moment. Sean, you guide us. What should we do going forward?
Well, thank you for your answer to the question that we received in advance. I have seen that we have questions from followers, from audience. So I'm not sure if you can read the question from your own PC in the chat window. Well, let me read it. The question from Yasser Aldo Seri, that how to deal with the NPCs and federations fear of reopening the swimming pools for training, especially at time is running out for the players, although the private swimming pools have been reopened with government approval.
Mm-hmm. I see. Well, again, you have to check what's your national regulations, what your local laws are from that perspective. I understand the question is how to, well, there is a restricted time, there is a restricted participation for the certain sports facilities. But at the same time, those para-athletes preparing for the games in Tokyo, they need more time. I guess that's more or less what the question is about. Well, again, you may wish to approach local authorities. Of course, the general rule is in place, distancing, limited use, limited time, but you may bring a point that we're talking about the professional sport. We're talking about preparing for the games, and from that perspective, to seek for certain, well, it's not an exemption, but to certain adjustments to the requirements, because again, most of the time the facilities are following strictly the requirements of the local authorities. It is the same case in the UAE, for instance. Well, I can tell that certain sports which are not contact sports, like tennis, for instance, they can run the event, they can organize the event. But other sports like jiu-jitsu, because there is a full contact, and well, there's no way you can avoid the contact. These sports are still prohibited. But there are training sessions. Again, you have to be creative. You have to be, well, in a way, you have to be active in convincing the facilities or facility managers that, subject to all requirements, to all safety requirements, in principle, you will not break the local laws and local requirements. And hopefully they will be flexible to allow you to allocate certain timings, additional timings, and additional facilities. I hope it answers the question.
Okay. I think this is not a question. It's kind of suggestion or sharing ideas that from DIRA, hold on a sec. DIRA call regarding self-declaration of athletes about their health, it should be made mandatory for the NPC to check it at their end. Thank you so much for the presentation. Okay, so
well, again, I mean, if you think of it as a mandatory document, you have to consider at what instance you take that declaration. If it happens during the event, then yes, you can make it a condition to sign that declaration. And by the way, there is at the IPC website, there is a format which is quite basic, but you can utilize it. There is a format of this self-declaration. So it helps you on one hand to keep the record, because you still have to, to collect the data, and you will do it anyway. But on the other hand, it helps you also to protect yourself from any potential claims that the athletes or participants may have. So I'm with the colleague on that point. I think it's a good tool.
Okay, we have one more question from NPC Bhutan. Correct me if I'm wrong. Is it injuring or inuring? I mean, you can ask the question yourself, Mr. Pinjor Gisten.
Thank you. Sorry, it's a typo. I wrote ensuring the athlete.
Okay.
It's an interesting thing to take away from the presentation today. I was asking if the athletes, when they are supported by athlete support grant, especially for developing NPCs. So when we attend a world championship or any other championship, are they insured automatically, or the NPC is supposed to do that if they're traveling outside? There was a topic on insuring the athletes, right?
Right, exactly. Well, yes. For certain countries, it is a requirement. For instance, to enter the UAE, you have to fill out the application. You have to download the application. And again, it's a self-declaration. So you have to confirm that you have proper medical insurance and that you will be able to sustain your medical treatment and accommodation in the UAE. So from that perspective, it can be a requirement from those hosting countries where the athletes are traveling. But to answer your question, the program itself does not, again, I'm not familiar with the program, but I believe it does not imply that insurance is implemented, because health insurance is arranged with the insurance companies. So you have to have insurance policy, and you have to insure the athletes separately. And then again, it's the question whether the supporting program, and of course, it's always the question of budget and how you can allocate those funds. If the supporting program specifically points out that you have to provide insurance, health insurance to the athletes. So again, you have to check the document to see whether it's the insurance that you have to provide or not, but it's not by default that the insurance is implemented. I hope I managed to answer the question.
Thank you. You did.
Thank you. Any more questions from floor? Nope. I don't see anyone raise their hand or ask their question in the chat window. So this is an opportunity to ask your question.
Well, you can share my contact details, Sean. It's fine.
Okay.
So if someone, and I think you will send the presentation as well, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We will upload the presentation after this webinar, so you can check the presentation on our registration page, and you can download it anytime. Okay. Yeah, I think this is all, unless John has any further comment or from Damir for this session.
Just want to say thank you to Damir for a wonderful, I would say, in 1 hour, so much here to explain, and I think so much for them to chew in. But it's an overall package. I think it covers most of the points from COVID pandemic, and like Damir just said, he has given his time and number and contact details. And even if you have any requests to APC, to the LEC, of course, the Legal Ethics Committee, if there's any query coming, we can also take that to assist you. Other than that, thank you, Damir. Wonderful presentation.
Thanks a lot, John. And well, no further comments on my side. I probably can wish you a good day, depending on which time time zone you are in. And thanks a lot for your participation.
Okay, thank you, John and Damir and everyone. So I think this is it for today's session. Like Damir said, if you have any further question after the session, either you can contact APC office or Damir or John directly. And yeah, I hope everyone enjoy today's session and presentation. It was very helpful and practical for your working. And wish you all the best, and take care of yourself and take care of each other until we see you again. Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.